Charlie Kirk is dead. That's right, the king of the online right is no longer with us. Over the past few weeks, a shocked nation has been mourning his death. Well, everyone except for his wife. She doesn't seem that choked up about it.
I am so excited.
Yeah.
Immediately using your husband's death to cash out and hold massive political rallies is just really gross. But this begs the question, who will replace him? Well, some on Twitter this week have been saying it's this guy named Brylan Hollyhand, whose name is almost as dumb as Hadi Rahim, and who is somehow younger than me. But I don't know, I'm not totally sold on this guy yet. I think the throne will go back to a previous office holder. As the saying goes, reject modernity, embrace the late 2010s.
You can think whatever you want of me.
Why don't you
frankly,
just try and
I don't
answer
care.
the
I don't
questions?
frankly give a damn what you think of me since I've never heard of you.
Ben Shapiro is a conservative political commentator who has honestly fallen off in recent years. His company has been facing financial trouble for a while now, causing them to lay off staff en masse and replace their CEO. He's also just been losing relevance to younger, more dynamic, and yes, more extreme political commentators. He rose to prominence in the late 2010s as the right-wing logic man. He popularized the term facts don't care about your feelings. This really doesn't seem fitting though, because his primary rhetorical strategy is to appeal to logic, not facts, as the facts generally aren't on his side, although he and his fans will claim that he appeals to both. Ben Shapiro went viral on YouTube, with videos of him supposedly owning teenagers in college on feminism, racial justice, and economics. It made him the king of the online right, for a time. Although now, I think it's safe to say, he's back. So on today's episode of Progressive Primers, I thought I'd strike at the king. We'll be debunking 5 BS Ben Shapiro arguments. I think I'm the prime demographic to take him on. After all, I am a teenager in college. Before I begin, I'd like to give a special shout out to the now deleted Polydice YouTube channel, who made a similar video debunking 10 horrible Ben Shapiro arguments in 2019. His channel was a huge inspiration to me, and I'm really sad that he stopped making videos and purged them from the internet. So thank you for everything, Polydice, and I hope you don't mind me borrowing your idea. In my defense, these will mostly be new arguments. Argument 1. The rich already pay their fair share. This is the counter-argument to the progressive talking point that the super rich don't pay their fair share in taxes.
According to Statista's research department, the top quintile of income earners in the United States earned approximately 52.2% of all income in the United States. The top 1% pay approximately 40% of all federal income tax. The top 50% of taxpayers pay essentially all income taxes. In actuality, the United States has the world's most progressive income tax system, at least according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Notice how he only brought up income taxes. Yes, it's true that the top 1% pay the bulk of the income taxes, but this number doesn't actually consider the share of their total net worth that they pay to the government. Some of the richest people in the world barely make any income whatsoever. For example, Mark Zuckerberg's base salary as CEO of Meta is $1 a year. He receives $28 million in other forms of compensation directly from Meta, like security and transportation. But this isn't subject to the income tax. The net worths of these individuals are primarily composed of stocks, which aren't taxable in themselves unless they're sold. And if they are sold, they're subject to a capital gains tax, which in America has a tax rate of only 20%. Meanwhile, the top income tax rate is 37%. So a doctor who worked hard to get their education and works harder every day in a hospital would pay a higher tax rate than Warren Buffett, who makes money by having his money make more money. It is not just and moral for a society to tax this group, who actually works for a living, more than this group. Because of the way the richest people make their money, through wealth as opposed to income, the Forbes 400 paid an average effective tax rate of 24% from 2018 to 2020, while all other US taxpayers paid 30%. This is what people refer to when we talk about a fair share. Western civilization is facing a growing problem of wealth concentration. The top 1% own 31% of the nation's wealth. The bottom half of Americans? Just 2.6%. This is not a good thing, because concentration of wealth means concentration of power. It's why Elon Musk was allowed to have such an incredible influence and cause significant damage to our government, despite being unelected. We have an oligarchy problem. The rich need to be held in check. And a good way to hold them in check would be a wealth tax. Tax the value of their assets, not just their income, and the playing field will suddenly become more level. But Hadi, you can't tax unrealized gains. That's stupid. That means you'd have to liquidate some of that wealth into cash to pay the tax. Okay, so one, we already have property taxes, which effectively do the same thing. And two, they're not unrealized gains. The richest people use their wealth as leverage to borrow from banks at extremely low interest rates to purchase things like yachts and mansions, a process known as buy, borrow, die. Just because it's not a gain in a traditional sense doesn't mean that the rich aren't using their assets to become materially richer. Acting like owning $1 billion in Amazon stock but never cashing it out once in your life is effectively the same thing as owning $0 in Amazon stock is disingenuous. But Hadi, why is the government entitled to their money? Well, because a lot of the wealthiest Americans arguably rely the most on the taxpayer. Think about all the Amazon trucks on the road right now earning Jeff Bezos his billions. Those roads were funded through public taxpayer money, yet Amazon consistently gets away with paying $0 in taxes. And Bezos pays less than the average American. This is what we mean by fair share. People ought to be able to work hard and reap the benefits, but they should also pay it forward, because nobody gets rich alone. Argument 2. Climate change is not an emergency.
Hi Ben, my name's Ember. In 2021, you said that the potential rise of global temperatures by 4 degrees Celsius due to climate change is, quote, not an emergency, and even made fun of top scientists for calling climate change a climate emergency. A new study by the Journal of Natural Science says that if by the end of the century, climate change will total up to 83 million deaths because of climate-related causes.
Yeah, they're wrong. Sorry, go ahead, but continue, but I'll explain why. Go ahead.
I'm wondering, Ben, why you believe that climate change is not an emergency.
Okay, because they're wrong. So now here's the, sorry, I didn't let you get to the question mark. The reason that they are wrong is because all of these studies are done in the absence of mitigating measures.
This is just a lie. So fun fact, I actually know Ember. While researching for this video, I was pleasantly surprised to come across this exchange. I decided to reach out to her to help me with this segment because if there's anyone who knows anything about climate policy, it's her. Ben never gave her a chance to respond, so I thought I'd use my channel as a platform to counter. Thanks, Ember. One of the things she pointed out was that the IPCC does account for mitigating measures, specifically through their shared socioeconomic pathways scenarios, which are central to the work of UN climate reports. There are 5 different SSP ranges, and they all account for varying levels of mitigation, from SSP 1 to 1.9, which takes into account strong mitigation measures, to SSP 5 to 8.5, which takes into account little to no mitigation efforts.
So as I've said before, when I talk about climate change, when you're talking about climate change, there are a couple of things human beings can do. And by the way, I accept IPCC estimates. They range from sort of the mild, like 1.5 degrees Celsius, all the way up to the not very mild, like 4 degrees Celsius, again, over the course of the century. And because there is this range, the more extreme versions of this, the 4 degrees Celsius, whenever you read the IPCC reports, which I have, when you read those reports, they say in them that they have very low confidence that some of the more catastrophic sort of predictions are going to occur. They will say low to moderate confidence. The less catastrophic predictions, they'll say more like high confidence or fair high confidence, that kind of stuff.
Ben claims that the worst case scenario is unlikely to happen, and that the stuff that the IPCC is more confident about isn't actually that bad. Now, the consensus among experts is that we're going to fall anywhere from SSP 2 to SSP 4.5, which means anywhere of an increase from 2.1 to 3.5 degrees Celsius in global temperatures by the end of the century. This is very bad and will increase agricultural and ecological drought, contribute to rising sea levels, extreme heat, and heavier precipitation. It will disrupt ecosystems, create more climate refugees, and put millions of people's lives at risk. Downplaying this is extremely dangerous.
So there's 2 ways you can deal with it. One is mitigation, which is we all stop driving cars, we stop using electricity, we don't have kids anymore, right? We really cut down on our carbon usage in ways that are catastrophic to the world economy.
Okay, so first off, this is just a straw man. Nobody is saying we need to stop driving cars, stop using electricity, and stop having kids. Ben also implies that we just can't afford to mitigate climate change. And I argue back, we can't afford to not mitigate climate change. Several studies estimate that not doing anything could cost us anywhere from 5 to 15% of our GDP by 2100. Also, Ben's being very disingenuous here. It's not like every single mitigating measure will be a net cost for society. Much of what we would do could be a net gain. The green industries that would emerge from climate policy could create tens of thousands of new jobs and stimulate economic growth.
And what it really mostly does is it says to people in the developing world, hey, you're screwed. Because those are the people who really need carbon-based emissions. It's very easy for those of us who live in extraordinarily prosperous societies to say, you know what, I'm cutting down my carbon emissions a little bit because we live in very prosperous societies.
This is oddly woke. Since when do conservatives care about the developing world? But yes, these countries are going to have to make sacrifices too. Ben usually has no problem with the poor making bigger sacrifices than the rich as long as the size of the pie gets bigger. But the second it means that we need to dismantle the oil industry, which funds his show, he suddenly cares about economic injustice. It's just disingenuous.
Carbon-based energy is by far the most efficient form of energy on the planet.
No, that's just a lie. Hydropower has the highest operational efficiency, and nuclear has the highest capacity factor.
Again, this doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. It means what we ought to be doing is the thing that will prevent the 83 million deaths, which is why I'm very confident it will prevent the 83 million deaths, adaptation. This means, for example, that we build seawalls. The simple fact of the matter is that New Orleans exists below sea level. When the seawalls, when levees were breached because the levees were poorly built, it killed 10,000 people. When the levees, last time around, this last year, there was a major hurricane. It swept directly through the exact same area, and pretty much no one was killed. The reason being, the levees were much better built.
What kind of dystopian world does Ben Shapiro want to live in, where thousands of miles of coastline are just walled up to protect us from the consequences of our own irresponsible actions?
Human beings are great at adaptation, and we suck at mitigation. And as I've said before and been mocked for it, the simple fact of the matter is over the course of the next 100 years, when you see all these maps and it's like this area will be flooded and all those people will be dead. No, because they won't be living there. Because as it turns out, when the tide rises, people move inland. This is what has been happening throughout human history.
Ah yes, the classic, people will just sell their houses and move inland. Really, Ben? Who are they going to sell their houses to? Also, again, how dystopian? Our once great American cities will either become fortified barriers or uninhabitable. And we're just supposed to accept that.
Slow-moving crises are not crises. They're problems, not emergencies.
This is just arguing semantics. Whether it's happening quickly or not, the underlying point is that the effects of climate change will be catastrophic for the human race. After being forced to watch this clip dozens of times for this video, I noticed that Ben was talking faster than usual. He also just seemed to be filibustering in a really, honestly defensive way. His argument is basically that climate change is real, sure, but it's not gonna kill us quickly or anything, and the people who talk about it are catastrophizing. Just build seawalls and move away from the coasts. Stop talking about this, please. This is just Ben coping with the fact that his ideology, conservatism, can't actually solve this problem. So if we pretend that it's not real and then downplay the negative effects, well, it's fine. The reality is that there needs to be some level of government involvement to solve this problem, because capitalism, or at least capitalism that allows for large publicly traded corporations to dominate, drives them to value short-term profit above all else. This is why you shouldn't just have blind devotion to your own ideology. I mean, I'm a proud progressive, but even I admit that free trade and deregulated zoning are just better policies for society overall. Argument 3. Free healthcare won't work in America because America is too diverse. This is an argument I've talked about before on Medicare for All Mondays. It's an old one, but he still makes it, so I thought I'd include it. The argument is this.
You've been elected president. What's your first initiative as president of the United States?
Single-payer healthcare. I feel like the right wing in America puts words in the mouths of Canadians and people living in Great Britain when it comes to their health insurance, policy, and their nationalized healthcare. But you talk to them, and they seem to love it.
First of all, I mean, whenever we get into these sorts of discussions, you have to start looking at apples-to-apples comparisons in terms of the demographics of the United States, our age, the ethnic composition of the United States, because different ethnicities actually have different health problems disproportionately. Just in terms of ethnic diversity, the ethnic diversity in the United States is very different from the ethnic diversity of Canada, right? Canada is nearly homogenous. The ethnic diversity in the United States is very different, and different ethnic groups do have different health problems. For example, heart disease is more prevalent in black men than it is in white men. That's just a fact. That has nothing to do with moral culpability or anything. It's a reality that...
Okay, first, the context. In this clip, he's debating Anna Kasparian on Medicare for All. Since this is progressive primers, I should probably prime you on what Medicare for All actually is. Medicare for All is the proposed government-run health insurance program in the US. It would be a single-payer system where the government would pay for almost all healthcare services. Despite being publicly funded, it would still be privately delivered. This makes it more like Canada's system than Britain's, which is both publicly financed and publicly operated. Medicare for All would expand the current Medicare program to cover everyone and reduce most cost sharing. This would essentially make most healthcare in America free at the point of service and funded by taxpayers. Oh cool, now that we're caught up, Ben's argument is absolutely ridiculous and also incredibly racist. I mean, it's technically true that different ethnicities are more likely to get certain diseases, but so what? Like, yeah, black people are more likely to get sickle cell, but is Ben Shapiro acting like this is the #1 cause of death for African Americans? Yes, white people are more likely to get skin cancer, and skin cancer is common. But so what? Ben hasn't really explained why this would be an obstacle for the government, but not private business. He's arguing that free healthcare only works in countries where everyone is of the same race? Like, really? How many black people would have to move to Norway for their healthcare system to suddenly stop functioning? Additionally, Medicare, the government-run health insurance program, already exists and serves tens of millions of American seniors from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, and it works effectively. It's one of the most popular government programs and is more efficient and spends less on administrative costs than private insurance. So ethnic diversity, as far as we know, hasn't caused any problems in the administration of Medicare, but it would for Medicare for All? It doesn't make any sense. This is just one of the many weak arguments Ben and other conservatives make against public healthcare. Another one is that the US is just too big, either geographically, in which case I point to Canada, or population-wise, in which case I point to Japan. The reality is that America having such a large population actually probably helps it run its healthcare system more than it hurts it. One of the reasons Medicare pays less for healthcare from providers than private insurance is because so many people are on Medicare, giving the government enormous leverage when bargaining for prices with providers. If everyone were on Medicare, the leverage the government would have would be insane. This is why numerous studies find that Medicare for All would ultimately cost less than our current system. Medicare pays much lower reimbursement rates than private insurance. Conservatives push back against this by saying that it causes doctors to not take Medicare, but that obviously wouldn't happen if everyone were on Medicare. And also, we should make medical school free, so doctors aren't burdened with student loan debt. Sorry, I went on a healthcare tangent there. The point is, this argument is BS. Moving on, argument 4. Capitalism is voluntary.
Employees' freedom is not infringed upon when they enter into a consensual relationship with an employer that includes certain types of health care.
Not consensual.
Of course it is. They can quit. Who is forcing them? Where is the gun?
Huh?
Where is the gun? Who is forcing them? Where is the chain? Who is locking them to their
Stop
desk?
with the gun language.
Bottom line to me is it is not vicious, cruel, or immoral for me to make you an offer that you consensually accept. In fact, it is vicious, cruel, and immoral for someone who's a third party to get involved, or for you to leverage a gun to get in the middle of that consensual relationship.
This is a prevalent talking point on the right, and it's been used to justify worker exploitation for centuries. The idea is that there should be little to no regulations on the free market because the government shouldn't be interfering with the right of two parties to contract. In this case, we're talking about the employees and the employer. Ben argues that nobody is forcing the employee to work for the rate and benefits that the employer is offering. Where is the gun, he argues. Therefore, it is wrong for the government to interfere. This argument isn't a new one. It was made over a century ago by the Supreme Court under the liberty of contract doctrine. In the 1902 case of Lochner v. New York, a baker sued the state after it fined him for violating a law limiting the number of hours employees could work for. The court struck down the law because it violated the liberty of contract in the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment actually says nothing about the right to contract. The majority just said that it was implied when the amendment said, "No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." They argued liberty of contract was one of the liberties guaranteed by this amendment. Now, of course, this is bogus. It's right-wing judicial activism. But that case set forth the Lochner era, a period of time where the Supreme Court struck down laws that regulated business or protected workers under the same liberty of contract. Minimum wage laws? Unconstitutional. Child labor laws? Unconstitutional. Regulations on banks, insurance, and railroads? Unconstitutional. This era of corporate tyranny lasted for nearly 40 years, and it didn't end until West Coast Hotel Company v. Parrish, which overturned the Lochner case, allowing a surge of worker and consumer protection legislation to become law. Although Americans thankfully no longer live under this doctrine, conservatives like Ben still propagate it. The main problem with Ben's argument is that capitalism isn't actually voluntary. There's a large power imbalance between the employee and the employer. If you don't work and don't make money, you starve to death. This means that you are forced to work to survive. That is the gun, Ben. You even admit this.
Capitalism is, in essence, forced altruism, because if I don't give you something that you want, then I will starve. If I don't give you something that you want, then I will starve, because it is based on consent, whereas socialism is based inherently on force.
Ah, yes. Capitalism is just voluntary exchange between two parties. This exchange is so voluntary that if you don't do it, you'll starve to death. But Hadi, what about competition? Sure, competition in the market does increase the power of the worker, but there's a natural limit. The fact of the matter is, you need the job a lot more than they need you. It's really only when workers band together to organize and negotiate collectively that the balance of power shifts in the workers' favor.
There is a vast difference, a huge difference in terms of personal liberty and freedom between the government compelling behavior and a company.
Yes, the difference is that you vote for your government. You can't vote for your employer's policies. Another problem with capitalism and the voluntary argument is that companies are run as dictatorships and oligarchies, with a small group of powerful people at the top that make all the decisions and effectively control whether you get a roof over your head or food on the table, and, in America at least, health insurance. So just quit. Quit? And go to another company that's run like an oligarchy? What choice is that? What's the solution? Simple. Run business like a democracy. Let the workers have a greater say in how their workplace is run. In Germany, companies with over 2,000 employees are required to ensure that half of the members of their supervisory boards are workers. This is called co-determination. Why not try this in the US? It would be a major step towards democratic socialism and could eventually lead to worker-owned businesses, where most companies are owned and operated primarily by workers. You'd still benefit from the efficiency of the market and have the same incentives that make the market better than central planning, but this time without leaving workers behind. Anyways, theory time over. The point is, Ben is wrong. Capitalism isn't voluntary. It's exploitation. And finally, argument 5. Israel has no obligation to protect civilians because Hamas is using them as human shields.
Aid dollars deployed to Gaza over the past 20 years have been embezzled by Hamas and used for its murderous plans.
Okay, first off, this is just a lie. There is no hard evidence of a systemic effort by Hamas to embezzle UN or US aid. Israeli military officials have literally admitted this. Additionally, an internal review by the US also found no proof of Hamas stealing US aid systematically. As for the money that Hamas does get directly, Israel literally allowed Qatar to give money to Hamas over the border in the form of cash in suitcases. The incompetence is astounding.
But now the international community and legacy media say it's up to Israel to make humanitarian provision for Gaza's civilians.
Yeah, because that's the law. It's in Article 55 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which states that the occupying power has the duty of ensuring the food and medical supplies of the population. Not only did Israel not do anything to help the food situation in Gaza, they literally undermined it. At the beginning of the war, the defense minister said that Israel would be cutting off all food, fuel, water, and electricity.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
Now, I can understand fuel. I can even, to some extent, understand electricity. But no food and water? What military purpose is there to cutting off food and water? It's not just Hamas that needs to eat, you know. Israel has been deliberately starving Gaza, and they've been found by the US State Department to have been systematically blocking aid. And now their current efforts to supply food have been so catastrophic, half-assed, and actively malicious that there is now a confirmed famine in Gaza.
This is, of course, disingenuous. 0 of the countries that voted in favor of a UN resolution pushing a ceasefire have offered to take in any Gazan civilians. None have called for Hamas to surrender to Israel so far, which would end the conflict immediately.
Okay, I agree this is cringe, and this is because of xenophobia. Countries don't want to take in refugees, but this has nothing to do with the ceasefire. It shouldn't just be up to other countries to take in refugees because Israel decided to carpet bomb all of Gaza and starve the population. It should be up to Israel first to behave itself. Israel claims to be a bastion of Western liberal values. It should live up to them. And of course they don't want Hamas to surrender. If Hamas surrenders and there's an Israeli occupation, then Gazans are just going to be treated like second-class citizens, like Palestinians already are in the West Bank. This is a valid concern. Far-right factions of the government are lobbying for the long-term occupation or even annexation of Gaza, as well as the building of settlements. The cabinet recently voted to have the military take over Gaza City. There needs to be a serious plan for a democratically run Gaza without Hamas post-war, but Israel hasn't provided one.
No, they say Israel has to stop its attempts to destroy Hamas. The innocents are suffering.
Correct.
Hamas started this conflict. Hamas is the governing body in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has chief responsibility for the health and welfare of Gazan, Palestinian, Arab civilians.
Yeah, except not when they're under occupation. Again, read the Geneva Conventions.
By the way, the Gazan government is Hamas. They literally elected them. They provide public services.
Ben is being intellectually dishonest here. He's saying Gazans voted for Hamas. Yeah, like in 2006, 19 years ago. And then they never had another election again. Half of the population of Gaza is under 18, so it's ludicrous to say that Gazans chose Hamas. But even if they did, it doesn't matter. That's not an excuse to kill civilians. Just because George W. Bush tortured people, it doesn't give other countries the right to bomb American hospitals because America voted for Bush. Well, actually, that election was stolen, but that's a separate issue.
But here's the math, apparently. If a population elects a terrorist leadership, that terrorist leadership consolidates its control by wiping out its political rivals, that terrorist leadership steals billions of dollars in aid and impoverishes its own citizens in the process, and then the terrorist leadership murders 1,500 Jews and kidnaps another 233 people, then so long as the terrorist leadership hides in tunnels underneath civilian populations, the terrorists have to be left alone. This is insanity, total insanity. It is insanity no other country on earth would be expected to weather or be concerned about. Not the United States, not the UK, not France, not Germany, no one.
It's not insanity. It's international law. The human shields line isn't an excuse. The police would never blow up a school to stop a school shooter. It is not okay for Israel to blow up a hospital because there might be one member of Hamas hiding in the basement. If someone thinks that's okay, then ask them if it would be okay to blow up an Israeli hospital full of Israelis that had one member of Hamas hiding in the basement. If they were to say no, then they just value Israeli lives more than Palestinian ones. At the beginning of the war, Israel bombed Jabalia refugee camp, which was packed with civilians, to get one member of Hamas. The attack killed hundreds of innocent men, women, and children. When Wolf Blitzer asked an IDF spokesperson why they did it, this was his response.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there, you knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that he was killed.
Even Wolf Blitzer, who is no Palestinian militant, can't believe what he's hearing. It's disgusting. Israel just doesn't care if civilians are collateral damage. There are literally hundreds more examples of this. But this was the first sign to me that what Israel was doing was genocide, which, by the way, is now the consensus opinion among scholars. And that consensus is growing. And to top it all off, Israel's strategy hasn't even been effective at A, getting the hostages back, or B, eliminating Hamas. In fact, in his way out the door, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken admitted that Israel's strategy has actually created more members of Hamas.
Each time Israel completes its military operations and pulls back, Hamas militants regroup and reemerge because there's nothing else to fill the void. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost. That is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war.
Gee, it's almost like when you starve entire cities and turn thousands of kids into orphans, the population becomes more radicalized and more willing to join Hamas. Israel's strategy has been an abject failure on every level. But Ben wants his ethno-state, so he'll continue to defend the policies of the far-right government in Israel. And he'll call you an anti-Semite if you disagree. Okay, I'm done. I was gonna make some broad, flashy statement about how Ben Shapiro doesn't live up to the hype like Polydice did at the end of his now-deleted video, but honestly, while researching for this video, I noticed something. He's honestly not as bad as the other guys. Like, Charlie Kirk is bad because he's openly racist and makes bad arguments, and Matt Walsh is bad because he wants to take us back to 1950, and his arguments appeal too much to the Bible. Ben, by contrast, is a much smarter, more intellectually honest, more moderate, and generally just a better person. And his arguments appealed more to logic. The new guys don't even frame themselves as the logical ones anymore. And this is saying a lot, because Ben is still terrible, and really dishonest, and really illogical, and really right-wing. But like, at least Ben Shapiro is not dumb enough to say that all taxation is theft. Charlie Kirk, on the other hand,
saying we're going to just raise tax on the billionaires, that statement, you just violated 2 out of the 10 commandments.
That's not true.
Thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not covet. We're going to go take other people's money.
How is that stealing?
Because it's their money.
We live in a society that is run by taxes. How is that stealing?
Well, taxations are a form of theft.
So yeah, while Ben's bad, he's smarter and brighter than a lot of the other guys, and the fact that he's losing relevance says a lot about where the right is headed. I hate to admit it, but in 10 years, we'll be wishing we had more Ben Shapiros and less of whatever this is.
Yeah, sorry, pea-brain woman. Maybe that's why you should focus more on 2 slices of bread, peanut butter, and jelly than political commentary. Maybe you should leave that to the big brain men.
God help us all. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Hamiltonian patron, the Engineering Potato, as well as those listed on screen. If you want a shout out and/or your name in the credits, please consider donating to my Patreon or Ko-fi page. Both allow you to give monthly subscriptions for the same benefits for each tier. You'll get access to behind the scenes stuff, early access to videos, all that jazz. And Ko-fi has a special feature where it allows you to tip me one time. So please consider that. All the money you give will be directly supporting my channel. Sorry this video took so long. Life happened. I hope it was worth it. I hope you enjoyed a more like policy wonky type video. Sorry, it's really late at night I'm recording this. My next video will either be something short or the long-awaited finale to Warhawks of Mass Destruction, my docu-series on the Iraq War. So yeah, I want to have the Iraq War video done by like Thanksgiving. So I might either dedicate all my time to that, or I might make a super short video to like keep your guys' thirst quenched while you're waiting for that video. And then after that video's done, huge milestone, I'm going to go back to making like regular content, progressive primers. Maybe I'll go back to making like longer form, like policy videos, non-progressive primer stuff. We'll experiment. My channel has seen enormous growth over the last few months, and I'm incredibly grateful for all that success. And I'd like to thank every one of my new subscribers. Welcome aboard. Thank you for giving me your time and in some cases even your money. And yeah, let's keep this train running. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.